Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Mochammad Abidin Abror. Welcome to my thesis proposal presentation. Good morning. I wish I could thank everyone individually because I know everybody who is watching right now has played a role in getting me where I am today. So I would like to begin by extending my heartfelt gratitude to each and every one of you. And special thank you to my research advisor, Mrs. Esti Kurniasih, S.Pd, M.Pd, and the research examiners, Mr. Fauris Zuhri, S.Pd, M.Hum, and Mr. Fahri, M.A. In this opportunity, I'm going to present my thesis proposal entitled An Analysis on the Undergraduate Students' Critical Thinking through the Composition of Paper Essay in Paper Writing Class. As one of the 21st century skills proposed by the National Education Association in the United States of America, critical thinking is paramount for each individual to keep up in this modern era. In Indonesia, critical thinking is considered an indispensable goal in education that all students levels need to acquire in contemporary education. There are plenty of strategies the teacher can implement to foster students' critical thinking skills. One of them is by assigning them to write an academic paper. Paper writing is one of the forms of academic writing that encompasses the development of background of the study, paper body, results and discussions, and writing a conclusion, abstracts, and references where the critical review is highly promoted. Thus, the teacher can assign the students to write conceptual paper to explore and promote the use of their higher thinking skills. Despite that, although critical thinking is included as a common objective as well as a 21st century skill, it has not been highly promoted in paper writing. The reason is that there are many students in Indonesia who do not realize that critical thinking skill development is very much involved in the composition of paper writing. So therefore, the study about the analysis of the students' critical thinking through the composition of paper writing needs to be conducted. Due to the aforementioned statement, there are some teachers and students who are still not aware of how paper writing contributes to the advancement of critical thinking skills. The researcher aims to focus on describing the critical thinking of undergraduate students in composing their paper writing, so therefore, the research questions are formulated as follows. Number one, how is critical thinking reflected in the students' paper writing? And number two, how do the students use their critical thinking in constructing their paper writing? Over the years, critical thinking has been one of the subjects that many researchers often discussed and explored. There are a plethora of studies done by the researchers that investigate the students' critical thinking. The first, Epstein and Kernberger define critical thinking as a skill to comprehend a particular topic and identify a logical reason why something happens to get a better understanding, while Devika and Somya, 2016, define critical thinking as a practice of consciously and skillfully visualizing, implementing, assessing, synthesizing, or reviewing information gathered from and generated as a guide to belief and action through observation, understanding, reflection, reasoning, and communication. To be effective thinkers, we must go beyond taking thinking apart. We also must apply standards to the elements of reasoning to assess our thinking and ensure its quality. Routine, consistent, and deliberate application of intellectual standards to reasoning over time leads to the cultivation of intellectual virtues. To be learned, these standards must be taught explicitly. The ultimate goal is for these standards to become infused in your thinking. So the criteria of critical thinking proposed by Paul and Elder, 2020 are clarity, accuracy, relevance, breadth, depth, precision, logic, and fairness. According to Fink 2014, paper writing, or sometimes called literature review, is a formal, clear, and reproducible means of describing, analyzing, synthesizing a body of work created by researchers and scholarly professionals. A literature review reviews scientific documents, books, and other applicable references relating to a specific subject, fields of study, or theory. It includes an overview, summary, and critical assessment of the works that are being studied about the research issue. A literature review helps ease scholars' lives by collecting, summarizing, analyzing, and synthesizing existing research on a specific topic, which may help students and scholars explore a new research area. If the literature review is part of a broader article. The introduction and conclusion sections will be just a few sentences as the writer concentrates most of his or her focus on the body. If the analysis is a standalone article, the introduction and conclusion take up more room and give the writer a place apart from the where he or she discusses the literature itself to discuss its goals, research methodology, and conclusions. Usually the structure are introduction, body, and conclusion. Moving on to the methodology. In this research, the researcher will be using qualitative research as the research design by considering several factors. First, this research is aimed at examining the critical thinking of students in paper writing. The second, the researcher needs to discuss and examine how critical thinking is reflected in the composition of paper writing by the student and how they can use their critical thinking to formulate paper writing to address the research questions. Thus, the result of the study will be in the form of description. The subjects of the study will be the students in one of the paper writing class in the English department of UNESA. The research setting. This study will be conducted in paper writing class in English education major of UNESA. To answer the first question, the researcher will collect the data in the form of sentences so that the students' paper writing results will become the source of data. The researcher will collect the data through the students' response to their questionnaire and the interview by the researcher, and the source of data will be the students' questionnaire. For the research instrument, the students' writing result and critical thinking rubric will also be used as a tool to get the data for the first research question, which is to find out how critical thinking is reflected in the students' paper writing. In the meantime, to obtain the audit data, the researcher will use a questionnaire as the second instrument, which is widely useful to collect information from its subject. As for the data collection technique, the researcher will collect the students' essay results from the task given by the lecturer. After collecting the students' essay from the lecturer, the researcher will use and analyze it using the rubric. As soon as the researcher obtains the first data, the researcher will proceed to distribute a questionnaire. According to Airy et al., in the analysis of data for qualitative studies, there are 3 stages in analyzing the data. The first stage is familiarizing and organizing, coding and reducing, and interpreting and representing the data. For the first stage, the first data from this study will be obtained from the students' paper writing results. To get familiarized with the data, the researcher will read the students' paper writing results repeatedly. After familiarizing the data, it will be organized into one folder in the researcher's personal computer to keep the data on the track. The researcher will proceed to organize the data by naming the files and analyzing the data in the next stage. Meanwhile, the researcher will familiarize and organize the questionnaire results by reviewing them regularly to answer the second research question and organizing them based on the ones that have a similar answer. After getting familiarized with the data, by comparing the students' writing results with the rubric, the researcher will place certain codes to show the important points in the data, and those who do not fulfill the rubric criteria will be reduced. Furthermore, the data will be coded to mark the important points to ease the researcher to continue to the next stage, which is to answer the second research question. In this study, the researcher will interpret and represent the data about how critical thinking is reflected in the students' paper writing. The data will be interpreted and presented with an in-depth explanation on how the students use their critical thinking in constructing their paper writing. And to answer the second research question, the researcher will also analyze the information collected from the interview by utilizing similar stages as to how the researcher analyzes the data collected out of the questionnaire. That is all from me. Thank you very much for watching. I would love to hear your feedback. It's been an honor. Thank you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.